years. So I'm going to introduce my panelists, and then we'll have a discussion. And then will somebody give me a sign when we've got 15 minutes or so for question and answer? And how late, what is our time frame here? An hour total. Okay. Okay, so at about 4:15, we'll break for questions. So if you'll hold them till the end, if it seems like we've got a lot of people dying to speak, we'll maybe start a little earlier. Okay, to my far right is my friend Bob Weil, who's the executive editor of Norton. He's been there for 12 years. Among the writers that he works with are Annette Gordon-Reed, J.G. Ballard, and Patricia Highsmith. And he has been in publishing in one form or another since we both got out of college 1 year, many decades ago. To my immediate right is Johnny Temple, who's the publisher of Akashic Books, which is a small publisher in Brooklyn, New York. They publish urban literary fiction and political nonfiction, and a real powerhouse of an up-and-coming publisher. Immediately to my left is Kim Robinson, who's the regional director of the University of California Press. Publisher?
Regional publisher.
Regional publisher, okay. My notes weren't so good. Formerly at Oxford University Press. She has been a music editor there, and she has been the head of Reference, which I think will be interesting because Kim is the one person on this panel who has worked in Reference particularly. Everybody else is in general fiction and nonfiction. And last but not least is Cary Goldstein, who is the publisher and editor-in-chief of 12, which is an imprint of Hachette. And he was there for the launch of 12 5 years ago? 5 years ago. Before that, he had worked at Farrar Straus in the publicity department. His acquisitions and the writers he works with include Benjamin Hale, who some of you may have heard this morning, the author of The Evolution of Bruno Littlemore. He works with a writer named Christopher Hitchens, and a writer named Christopher Buckley. So I think that the first question, which your presence here answers, is some wag said to me this morning, oh, you're doing a panel on publishing in the 21st century. Is there going to be publishing in the 21st century? And I think we're all here to say that there is. It's obviously very different. This has been a year or two of tremendous change. We were talking earlier that there were some things that we said with absolute ferocious surety a year ago about the growth of ebooks and what kind of ebooks would sell and et cetera, that are completely wrong. And if you guys at C-SPAN have the tapes of that, I'd like you to destroy them. But so the first question I would ask, and if we can start, let's start with Bob and come down this way, is what do you think is the single biggest issue facing publishing in the century going forward?
I think the biggest challenge right now is for publishers to adapt to the new technologies, especially ebooks. There are as many readers as there have always been. There are passionate, voracious readers. We've seen a huge increase in ebooks in terms of fiction in the last year. I still think the role of the editor, the role of the writer in coming up with the idea, with the public wanting to read it, is very strong. The way it is disseminated and presented is completely new and still creates major challenges as we're dealing with tectonic shifts in the way books are made and books are printed, although I still believe as a traditionalist that people also want to read the physical book, and I still edit all my manuscripts with pencils.
Johnny?
I agree completely with Bob's perspective there, and I actually think it's a very exciting time, but it sometimes seems that publishing is almost like not a politically conservative business, but a socially conservative business. It's one of the only, well, not one of the only culture industries, but when technology starts to change in music, they don't say, "Is music going to disappear?" You know, it's not just not. That's not the fear. I mean, the fear is on the business side of things, but in publishing, people do seem to have this sort of tangible fear that like writing is going to somehow sort of stop, or there's not going to be any more venues for storytelling. And I'm not really afraid of that at all. My one biggest concern and one challenge. A very serious challenge is ebook piracy, which is a huge problem. There's no way to protect ebooks from being pirated because there's these fancy new scanners. Anybody can scan a book and turn it into an ebook. And I know a company like mine, Akashic Books, is a relatively small independent company, and if you go searching, if you bad people go searching, you will find pirated versions of our ebooks. And if that's already happening to us, you can only imagine what's happening to, you know, gigantic international bestsellers. And I mean, as of right now, I don't think that it's hurt our business at all. I mean, the ebooks thing is actually very exciting, and we're doing quite well with our ebooks. But I think that is one sort of, you know, having seen what free did to the music business. It's going to be interesting to see how the publishing business reacts to the threat of free.
Okay, we're going to come back to that. That's a big subject. Kim?
Well, I'd have to agree. I mean, obviously, digital is shaking it up. And you mentioned my reference background, and I think it's interesting. When I first started working on reference, it was just about the time everyone thought CD-ROMs were going to be the way we distributed all reference things. And so I always go back to that to give myself perspective on the fact that these distribution mechanisms come and go, but we're still creating, you know, wonderful reference works in the world, amazing atlases and dictionaries and all sorts of creative ones, some of which aren't printed because they found actually a different form that might fit their content a little bit better. And so I think there are these exciting possibilities for writing that doesn't necessarily take a traditional narrative form to find interesting ways where the form might fit the content, not necessarily better, but in new and exciting ways. And so I think that's something that's you know, a positive spin on what to look forward to. But there are definitely going to be people that thrive in that environment, and probably some people that don't thrive.
Yeah.
Cary?
A colleague of mine referred to the delivery vehicle as plumbing. And I think it would be really interesting to think about what kind of conversations were happening around the mass market when it first came out, and other sort of new packaging ideas. But in essence, they're all delivering the same material, which Bob was saying. It begins and ends with the book. And I heard a great speech the other night at the Penn Festival in New York, and the publisher of Hachette Book Group was talking about, excuse me, the power of words and the power of books. And you know, we forget, watching a lot of these movements happening around the world, and everybody talks about digital delivery and social networking, and but really what begins movements, what begins revolutions are books and words. And I think what we do in publishing books is very important. I just had a conversation with our art department the other day about a book jacket, and I looked at two different book jackets, and I said, you know, that book I would keep on my shelf at home, and that one I would lend. And I still think the focus on the physical object and the text itself is a primary one for us. So.
I have to ask, why? What was the difference? I mean, why you mean you would lend it, meaning you didn't like it as much?
Yeah, one was a really beautifully designed jacket. It was a work of art in itself.
Right, you wanted it as an objet in your house.
Yeah, and one was just sort of a very traditional, standard jacket that didn't speak to me in any personal way. It wouldn't live on my shelf
I see.
with as much love.
So what you have to do is you have to get people to buy both of them, one to keep and one to lend. So I've been known to do that.
One for the libraries, one for the
Right,
bookstores.
I've been known to do that, but it's usually because I have so many books I can't figure out where the original one was, so it's just easier to go buy it again than to dig through the stacks. So you people love me, I know that. A couple of things that you guys just brought up that I think I'd like to explore a little bit. About a year or two ago, when we had these kinds of conversations here and elsewhere, I thought, and I think a lot of people thought, that well, I think none of us knew how quickly the ebook was going to catch on. And I don't even credit the iPad necessarily. I mean, I think it was starting before that, and the success of the Barnes & Noble Nook took, I mean, I think I wrote something about how it was going to be a disaster for the company. Well, you know, shows you what I know. You know, so I think we've all been surprised by how quickly people have taken